One bear, 50 people, 5 days. This is the true story of the deadliest bear attack in recorded human history. And it happened not in some ancient wilderness but in 1915 in Japan, in a village of farmers who had come to build new lives in a new land. They did not know what was coming. And by the time they did, it was already too late. The year is 1915. The Japanese government has been actively encouraging settlement of Hokkaido, the northernmost of Japan's main islands, for several decades. Land is available, opportunity is real. Thousands of Japanese families have moved north to farm, to build, to start again. The settlers arriving in the Sankebetsu district of western Hokkaido found fertile land and a promising future. They also found something they were not prepared for. Hokkaido is home to the Ushiri brown bear, one of the largest subspecies of brown bear on Earth. Males can weigh over 400 kilograms. Standing on their hind legs, they reach nearly 3 meters. And in the forests surrounding the new farms they had always lived, the settlers had no experience with bears. No traditions, no knowledge, no instincts built over generations of living alongside these animals. The Ainu people, the indigenous inhabitants of Hokkaido, had centuries of wisdom about bear behavior. The new settlers had none of it. This mattered more than they knew. In the autumn of 1915, a young male bear approximately 2.7 years old, large for his age, somewhere around 340 kilograms, began raiding farms near the Sankebetsu River. He was hungry. December was approaching and the natural food sources, salmon, berries, nuts, were depleted or gone. He had also sustained an injury that affected his ability to hunt efficiently. An injured bear is a desperate bear, and a desperate bear near farms full of food and unfamiliar, undefended humans is an extremely dangerous combination. The initial raids targeted crops and stored food. The farms were alarmed but not yet at the level of catastrophe. A village hunting party was organized. They found the bear and fired at it. They wounded it. They did not kill it. This was the mistake that changed everything. A wounded bear that survives a human attack is not simply a bear in pain. It is a bear that has now learned something critical: that humans attack but not fatally, that humans can be charged, that the fear goes both ways. On December 9, 1915, the bear entered the Miyok farm. The men of the village were in the forest hunting for it. The farm was left with women and children. What happened at the Miyok farm that night is documented in survivor accounts and official records. 3 people died, a woman and 2 children. The bear killed them and then moved the bodies, a behavior that indicates prey caching, a predatory act, not a defensive one. The bear was no longer raiding for food. It had learned that humans were prey. The next day, December 10, the bear struck again. The Akawa farm, more deaths, more bodies moved into the forest. By the end of December 10, the Sankebetsu district had lost 7 people in 2 attacks. The village was in a state of paralysis that anyone who has experienced genuine, uncontrollable danger would recognize. People barricaded themselves inside. Nobody would go to the fields. Nobody would go to the outhouse after dark. The children who had survived the Miyok attack could not stop screaming. The official death toll from the 2 days of direct attacks is 7. The broader accounting of bear-caused deaths in Hokkaido over the period surrounding this incident, when considered together, brings the number to approximately 50. Depending on how the records are counted and what incidents are included in the grouping. The Sankebetsu incident remains the deadliest single event, but it exists within a broader history of Hokkaido bear attacks during the settlement era that claimed dozens of lives. The Japanese government mobilized an enormous response. Over 100 hunters were called in from the surrounding region. Army soldiers were deployed. The largest organized bear hunt in Japanese history was underway, and the bear evaded them. For days, through deep snow in the darkness of a Hokkaido December, a 340-kilogram bear moved through the forest faster and more intelligently than the hunters could follow. It was not magic. It was the natural capability of a large predator in its own environment. In winter conditions it was built for, against humans who were operating outside their own. The hunters fired and missed. They set positions where they thought the bear would go and it went elsewhere. They found its tracks and lost them. 100 men with weapons could not locate one bear for days. Then they called Yamamoto Heikichi. Yamamoto was 65 years old. He was considered the most skilled bear hunter in the region, a man who had spent a lifetime learning the behavior of Ushiri brown bears in precisely this environment. He was not impressed by the chaos of 100 hunters. He did what the others had not done. He found where the bear had cached its kills and he waited there. Bears return to cached prey. This is one of the reliable patterns of bear behavior. Yamamoto knew this. He set himself up at the cache site, alone in the cold and the dark, and he waited. On December 14, 1915, the bear returned. Yamamoto fired once. The shot was direct. The bear was dead 5 days after the first attack. It was over after the bear was killed. It was examined thoroughly. What the examiners found confirmed several things. The bear's stomach was nearly empty. Severe hunger had been driving its behavior. There was evidence of eye damage, a form of corneal injury that may have affected its vision and its ability to hunt normal prey efficiently. And the bear was young, 2.7 years old. Not ancient, not diseased in the way we might imagine a monster to be. A young bear, hungry and injured, that had found an easy food source and learned to use it. The village of Sankebetsu was effectively destroyed by those 5 days. Many of the remaining settlers left. The community that had been building itself on the Hokkaido frontier was dismantled by a combination of grief, trauma and fear that made continuing impossible. The story was not widely told for decades. It was rediscovered by researchers in the 1970s, and has since become one of the most studied human-wildlife conflict incidents in history. What does this story tell us? It tells us that the danger in expanding into new territory is not imaginary. The settlers who came to Hokkaido were not naive. They were hardworking people building new lives, but they were operating in an environment they did not understand, with animals whose behavior they had no framework for interpreting. The Ainu people had that framework. Generations of living with bears had given them knowledge where bears traveled, what they ate, how they behaved when hungry or injured, how to move through their territory safely. The new settlers had none of this. And in December 1915, that knowledge gap cost 7 people their lives. It tells us that a wounded animal is the most dangerous animal. The hunting party that wounded the bear and let it escape made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. They had hit it. It had fled. Perhaps it would die in the forest. What they had actually done was create the conditions for the worst bear attack in recorded history. It tells us about the nature of learned predatory behavior. The bear that raided crops was dangerous but manageable. The bear that learned humans were prey was something entirely different, a predator that had incorporated human beings into its understanding of what food was. Once that learning occurs, it cannot be undone. The only resolution is removal, and it tells us something we know but forget easily. We are not always the most dangerous thing in any given environment. We build and settle and expand with the confidence of apex predators. And then, in a snowy December in Hokkaido, or a river camp in Savo, or a rice paddy in Bengal, something reminds us that the world has been here longer than we have, and that its other occupants are not waiting for our permission to exist. The bear that killed at Sankebetsu was not a monster. It was a young, hungry, injured animal that found food in a place where it should not have found food, because humans, unfamiliar with what they were sharing the land with, had built farms in the middle of bear territory without the knowledge to coexist safely. It was just a bear, doing what hungry bears do in a world that was, for a very long time, entirely theirs.